Welcome to episode 1 of You Know I'm Right. I'm your host, Nick Durst, right here on Double G Sports Radio. And on this show, we're going to do a lot of different things. We're going to have interviews. We are going to talk baseball, football, basketball, hockey, WWE. You name it, we'll discuss it. But right now, we are going to start it off with a very special interview.
Welcome in at this time the first guest on this show, and it's Adnan Virk. This guy has so many jobs, and in the past he's been way in front of employment rates being so high because he's taking over jobs. Host of Network and NHL Network, host of ChangeUp and Boxing on DAZN, NBA and NFL host on DAZN Canada, host of GM Shuffle with Mike Lombardi, Cinephile podcast, and Sirius XM Radio. I'm out of breath just saying all your names there, and welcome to the show.
Well, listen, you are my guy, Nick. And for those who are unaware, of course, we worked together at ChangeUp on DAZN. You did a phenomenal job with us. We miss you dearly, although, of course, right now we're dealing with other things beyond having your expertise in the building. But I appreciate the support you give to Cinephile as well. I don't know if you want to let this out there, but Nick, there's working pro bono just to help Cinephile and our massive Twitter following. So Cinephile Pod, help us out. Nick is doing his best. And for the rest of this interview, I'll be referring to you as Fred, which is, of course, I refer to you because of Limp Bizkit and Fred Durst. And we should be happy it's not Robert Durst and the Jinx. Go ahead, Fred.
No way. Yeah. So obviously Cinephile, tremendous Twitter account, so make sure you follow that. But Adnan Virk, really, our followers want to know how did Adnan Virk become Adnan Virk? So back in the day, you're growing up, you're in Canada, you're an AP at the Sports Network. How did you make that jump to on air?
I was so lucky, Nick. I look at what people have done over the years, and everyone just seems to work so hard. You know what it's like being on the air. You work hard, you have to love sports, and you just have to catch a break. You get a little lucky. And sometimes you got to think outside the box. I think that was the key for me. In some ways, the journey sounds fairly straightforward. Son of an immigrant family, go to broadcasting school, got a bunch of student loans, intern at a major network, of course, TSN, which is the sports network. And that time, it was like the ESPN of Canada. Now, of course, Sportsnet is there as well. So they're both twin towers, so to speak. But, interned there. And then, as you said, how do you get on air? Because I was doing pretty good there behind the scenes. I was finishing up school at Ryerson. And I probably could have had a really good career behind the scenes. I was an associate producer. I'd been promoted a couple of times. And I probably could have been a producer doing, hockey or baseball, SportsCenter, whatever it was. SportsCenter was an RE, of course. It's Canadian. But I did, of course, want to be on air. And persistence is everything, as you know. I got turned down for several jobs, including a TVO Kids job. TVO would be the equivalent, I think, of like PBS here. It's like a kids show host. I thought it would have been great. Weather Channel I got turned down for. There was a sports job in Sudbury, which is 5 hours north of Toronto and quite cold and known for being the nickel capital. Got turned down for that one, although David Amber, who's a great guy, gave me a great recommendation. Dave works on Hockey Night in Canada. He used to work at ESPN. He worked at TSN many years. So, yeah, I thought that was a good one. I said, I'll start in Sudbury, small town. Amber's going to work. It didn't work out. And then the one that I really thought I would get was a job back in Kingston, which is where I grew up, CKWS, local sports job. And that's the one you go, hey, no-brainer, man. This kid's from here. He goes to Toronto, gets his degree. Now he's going to come back home. And I said I didn't get that job, too. So how did it all happen? You got to think outside the box. And my dad was the one who found this posting for a job, and it was at a station called Omni. And it's promoting multicultural television. And the job was interstitial host. So back in the day, if you'd watch Letterman, you'd have Lucy Zilio, who's great, by the way. She'd do these interstitial hosts. So they could get a minute or two on camera about some funny story, and then you toss to Dave or whatever it was, whatever the program it was that they were using. So I auditioned for that. Didn't get that job. Familiar refrain here. But they said, we have a hiring for Bollywood Boulevard. And I said, okay, our family's Pakistani. I don't watch Indian movies. Of course, my parents did, or my mom specifically did. But we'll just get through it. And the producer was a great guy, Nalan, who's from Bombay. And he was like, I'll help you with all these names. You're a big movie guy. Like, we'll figure it out. And I got to be on TV, man. If you're 24 years old, all you want to be is on TV. It doesn't matter what you're doing, if that's what your goal is. And after that, I was fortunate enough to do that. Within literally 2 weeks, I got another job right there at the same station for Omni Culture, which was a show hosting a different, obviously Toronto's a very multicultural city. So it's all about, hey, there's Greek events taking place in the Danforth, Italian events at College Street. Caravan is a huge deal for the West Indies community, et cetera. So very quickly you get 2 jobs. And then, of course, this is the key here. You always need a break. The floor director at Omni says, what's your deal? Every time I see you in the hallway, you're watching sports all the time. Like, I don't think this is your thing. And his cousin, his name is Anthony Ciccione. He's running this new network called Headline Sports. I'll put in a word for you. Anthony calls me. He's the vice president. Says, listen, I think you're okay. I saw some of your stuff. I think you need more reps. Keep going. But let's keep in touch. Nikki says great things about you. He raved about you, so let's keep in touch. A couple months after that, I guess that improved enough. Anthony had me in for an audition. I could get the job, and then away we go. Once I got that job, Fred, I was 25 years old. That's a national sports network. It was called The Score, which is now defunct. But that was really huge for me. It felt like a long journey. Like I had 3 years of graduating, but I got to be a sportscaster from there. I got very lucky. Got a job at MLSC, which is Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, and then, of course, got the job at ESPN, which was life-changing.
Absolutely incredible background story there. And now I just can't picture anything else except you maybe doing weather. Or weatherman. How about it?
Fred, I was better than people would think. Remember, our boy Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. I mean, I remember asking the guy, I go, how do you do this? And if I just learn a couple of terms, and you know what it's like with a green screen for the audience that is unfamiliar. You don't actually see all those cities, but you know the kind of area it is. So you have to use a lot of terms like heavy precipitation, clearing quickly. I thought I did better than I would have thought, but obviously I didn't do nearly well enough to get the gig.
There's a reason why they call them weathermen. It's because they don't know whether they're going to be right or whether they're going to be wrong with their predictions. So they always say there's a chance of.
I like it.
So, born in Toronto, grew up in Canada. How the heck did you become a Philadelphia Flyers and Philadelphia Eagles fan?
Oh, great question, Fred. Attaboy. That's always the key. I swear to God, you know me, we're friends. I'm 41 years old. I think the biggest shock, I've been in America almost 10 years. The biggest misperception is always, big Leafs guy. I'm like, what? No, not at all. No, wait, you're born in Toronto, you grew up in Canada. I'm like, yeah, not a Leafs guy. My brother, I was a huge Oilers fan because he loved Gretzky and Yari Curry and Grant Fuhr. They obviously the great Oilers dynasty. So in 85 and 87, they played the Philadelphia Flyers. And naturally, being brothers, he's cheering for Edmonton, I'll cheer for the other team. And as a matter of fact, as we deal with this lull right now in sports, props to the NHL Network, one of my employers, they were replaying some of the 87 Cup final, which is literally, that's like, it's like you and Andy Chavez in the Mets. Like, it's just, unbelievable memories of Ron Hextall winning the Conn Smythe. The team lost, yet he won the Conn Smythe. That's how great Hextall was. I was 9 years old. I remember crying after Philadelphia lost. Heartbreaking Game 7, 3-1. Edmonton won. And they also replayed 85 the other day. 85 I don't remember as much. I was only 7. But I do remember Bob Froese and Murray Craven and a few of those players. So it's interesting. Sometimes you pick a team and you go, God, what was I thinking? You mentioned the Eagles part of it. So Flyers is like 85, 87. And then the Eagles, I loved Cunningham. So this is like 1990. And, of course, I loved Reggie White and those great Eagles defensive teams. But to your point, I remember thinking before Philadelphia won the Super Bowl, I screwed this up big time. I could have picked any NFL team, and particularly where we grew up. It was kind of a remote area of Ontario. The games I always get were the Giants and the Eagles. And I remember thinking, God, if I had just picked the Giants, I would have had Super Bowl champions, right? I would have been talking about David Tyree and Eli Manning and Michael Strahan. I'm like, dude, what was I thinking picking Philadelphia? I picked the one NFC East team that had not won a Super Bowl ever. But then, of course, thanks to Philly Special, things changed a few years ago. But what I want to ask you is this, because I agree with you. I think it's very unusual that a Canadian would have two Philadelphia teams. Could we find one sports fan in Philadelphia who would be a Toronto Maple Leafs fan and a Toronto Argonauts fan? Or even a Blue Jays fan and a Leafs fan, or a Raptors fan and a Leafs fan? Unheard of, right?
Highly unlikely. And another thing that's unheard of, and I got to ask you this question. How does a Muslim Canadian become the face of college football on ESPN?
It's pretty crazy, man. That actually might be even more unusual than the fact that I got to where I did in my career, because you're right, I didn't grow up with it at all. And when I auditioned at ESPN, I remember, and Amber told me, listen, they're going to keep typecasting as some Canadian who just likes hockey, which of course is not the case. You're a huge baseball fan, big NBA fan, big NFL fan. But I said, but I'm not a huge college sports guy. He's like, well, you know what, you have to fake it. So I do remember Al Jaffe and the ESPN folks asking me, and listen, Fred, I couldn't for the life of me have told you what the difference was between the SEC and the ACC and the Big Ten. I'm like, okay, I've heard these terms. I probably knew college basketball a little bit because there's enough Canadians that were playing in college hoops. I got hired by ESPN May of 2010. So by then, I had covered a Final Four, which was in Detroit. It's recalled 2009. Michigan State lost to UNC. And, that was when Michigan was dealing with the economic crisis. And I love Izzo. And then they got thumped by Tyler Hansbrough and the Tar Heels. So college basketball, I think it was okay. But college football, specifically what you mentioned, dude, I had no idea what the hell the Egg Bowl is. I remember, there would be so many terms. And I'm like, I have no idea where Starkville is or Fayetteville, any of these places. I wouldn't know the history of the Razorbacks, why they called them the Hogs, et cetera. And the answer to your question is one of the bosses there, maybe it's a couple of them, John Wildhack and Lee Fitting, and then Bill Graff later were like, hey, listen, we just think you'd be really good on raps. Raps means you're wrapping around studio production. So, you have a live game, you do half-times, you do pre-games, post-games. So prior to that, I've been doing sports dinners and that kind of stuff. And even, I swear to God, man, you know this, you never turn down a gig. But I swear, I was kind of like, are you guys sure? To your point, the Muslim Canadian doesn't really know college football, but to their credit, I think they're like, listen, you'll work hard, you'll figure it out. And I had great analysts, of course, including a fellow Canadian and Jesse Palmer. And Jesse went to school in Florida, so he knew it a lot better than I did. But we could make like Canadian jokes together. But I had great producers. As you know, same thing with MLB Network and DAZN. We have such great people around us. The researchers at ESPN were tremendous. Those guys would feed me nuggets and stats. I'd have no idea what I was saying, but they would make me look good every time. And I would say years 1 and 2 was definitely a work in progress. But by years 3, 4, and 5, I was pretty comfortable with college football and really grew to enjoy it.
How about Jesse Palmer going from backup quarterback on the Giants, ESPN analyst, goes into the second Bachelor, and now he's just all over the place. Unbelievable story.
Oh, listen, I mean, you talk about crossover stars. I mean, when someone says, oh, you worked at ESPN, you know this. I think the first thing they'd probably think of is Stephen A. Smith. Okay. If you knew how long I was there, it's okay. What about Chris Berman or the late Stuart Scott? Like, those are definitely things that come up. Of course, Olberman is my favorite, and I got to fill in for Keith. I met Keith. I kept in touch. Like, to me, that blows my mind. But you're right, Jesse Palmer. If we're at a party together and there's like 50 people, and you're like, hey, what's the name that you can drop that enough people will know? It'd probably be Jesse Palmer, because all the women will know him, and like I said, the guys will know him because of the Giants, and the girls all like him because he's as handsome as anybody out there. So he's a great dude. I'll tell you one thing about Jesse. He works as hard as anybody I've ever met. You think like, oh, okay, yeah, pretty boy, big hair, played football, but he comes in, dude. You would have scenarios like, oh, we got to talk about the Idaho Vandals. I'm like, oh my God. And Jesse keeps a very thick binder. He would have notes on every single team. He's one of the hardest working guys I've ever been around, in addition to being obviously a very funny guy and very talented.
Knows his college football, and I had the honor of watching the 2019 NFL Draft live in Studio K with you as you're broadcasting ChangeUp on DAZN. And, the Giants, I don't know what the heck Kennell was doing. They draft Daniel Jones, and I put out a poll, when will Pat Shermer be fired? You retweeted that, and he's already fired. But the thing that I want to ask you is, what's up with Giants fans and Daniel Jones stealing Danny Dimes from your guy, Danny Kennell, the original Danny Dimes of the New York Giants?
Thank you, Fred. You've tweeted that many times, which I appreciate. And Kennell, by the way, you'd love Kennell. I mean, what a great guy. He's so funny. He's a guy who loves to have a good time, and he loves to stir it up, which I appreciate. Anybody who can stir the pot. Danny does it great. Of course, he's trolled the SEC his entire life. And by the way, trolling, I think, sometimes implies you're being insincere. I think Danny actually means what he's doing, and he means what he said. I think he's authentic. But, of course, he enjoys the fact he's sticking to those guys, especially when Clemson was winning all those titles for the ACC. But, yes, he was the original Danny Dimes. Listen, you mentioned Danny Kennell's name, and, of course, football fans know who he is, especially in Bristol. There's so many Giants fans like yourself, guys who mentioned, comebacks he had. And, I mean, obviously, Florida State, he was tremendous. I remember Ryan Russo and I were talking, but you kind of forget how good Kennell was in college. Like, this guy was like an ACC Player of the Year. Like, he was tremendous coming out of Tallahassee. And I like the fact that you and I share the same chagrin with regard to Daniel Jones. You and I both think it's a bad pick. Our man Chuck thinks he's going to be like the next, Mark Whippen or something. Like, no, dude, like Daniel Jones may be all right. Like, I will go on record. I think you agree with me that he may be okay, but he's never going to be great. He's never going to be worthy of where they drafted him. Now, having said that, here's where I'm wrong. I had said they should draft Haskins, and Haskins has not worked out in Washington. And as you know, our man Michael Lombardi says he hears terrible things about Haskins and his work habits. So you know what? Maybe the Giants dodged the bullet by not drafting Haskins, but I never think this version of Daniel Jones is ever going to be a star quarterback that'll lead the Giants to the promised land.
Especially with the talented free agent class right now and the NFL draft class. But you could hear more about that. Check out GM Shuffle. Big episode coming out this week with the league year starting up. So big
Fred,
plug there for you.
Considering the void right now in sports, how about the NFL? Like, isn't it crazy? They're the number one sport in the country. You and I are both big NFL fans. All three major sports are in colossal crisis. The NFL goes, oh, we're good. Free agency's going. We got 10 years of labor peace. The draft is still going to happen. I mean, it's amazing how great the NFL is. And you're right. Me and Lombardi, we're expecting record numbers this week because everyone's going to be losing their minds by Wednesday of all this self-quarantining going on.
Certainly. The only show in town right now, of course, WWE as well. We might get to some